Hello there and welcome to Stick Around. Today we've got a music review for you. I'm going to be talking about Sister Cities by the Wonder Years. So the Wonder Years are a pop punk band from Pennsylvania. This is their sixth release, which came out earlier this year in April. I think it was the end of April, can't remember. A week before I went to see them live anyway. Essentially the album is about, I suppose you could call it a concept album. It's Soupy himself, Dan Campbell, the lead singer of the band, has said that he wrote the album about the 2 years they spent touring the last album, No Closer to Heaven, which I was a big fan of. It was one of our favourite albums of that year when it came out, 2015 I believe. Dan Campbell, Soupy, has said that he didn't write the album on tour as such, but when he got back, he went through his journals, went through all these photos that he'd taken on the tour and kind of pieced them together and, went through them and decided what he was going to write the songs about the sort of more momentous or more memorable parts of the tour and the ones that stuck out to him and that, made him feel things, I suppose. So he decided to write some songs about that, and that's essentially what this album is, a bunch of songs written about certain events during the tour, which I suppose makes it a concept album. This leads to perhaps his most visual lyrical style that we've seen so far on the track Raining in Kyoto, which is about him missing his granddad's death and funeral because of touring. He talks about a god, the fact that he's seen a god of rice, a fox with a key, which upon initially listening to it, I didn't know what on earth he was on about, but with a bit more research, it's clear that this is, a god of rice is a god in Japan, and he's often surrounded by foxes with a key who've got a specific name, which I've just forgotten, and I'm going to check my notes for. Kitsune, that's the one. Kitsune, might not be able to pronounce it, which usually have a key in the mouth, and they're a fox. So, god of rice, fox with a key, something very visual, possibly something he's taken from a picture. Another line that jumps out is, possibly just because I'm English, but, well, I'm not, I'm Swiss, but you know what I mean. That he talks about a bag of nectarines broken open on an English street, and about how the contrast is making him dizzy, which again, I imagine that's kind of a picture he's taken on his phone, and when he's been rooting through it, it's something that stuck out to him and something that he thought he would put into a song. And there's a lot of that in this album. There's a lot of these kind of visual memories where clearly almost kind of postcard ideas that he's put into certain lyrics. He's got these kind of ideas that stick out. It just gives the album a really visual feel. You can sit back and when you're paying attention to the lyrics, you're building up these pictures in your head, and I really like that about the album. Musically, the band I'm a massive Wonder Years fan, so have been for the last few years. They've been progressing a little bit from the sort of pop punk roots of, more simple song structures, I suppose, going, a more sort of chorus verse, not too much build up, straight, banging sing-along choruses that they're well known for on albums like The Greatest Generation, to a more sort of, I suppose you could call mature sound, I don't know, where they're building things up a little bit more. There's more sort of troughs before the peaks of the really big choruses, and that's something that they've definitely developed on this latest album, Sister Cities, since the last album, No Closer to Heaven. There's way fewer choruses on this album than there has been. They're all just as good, the ones that are there. I'd say they're probably a bit more impactful than they have been, just because of the fact that they've really layered the foundations. They've really concentrated on building those foundations before they go for the big choruses. And songs like Pyramids of Salt are a good example of a song that does have a bunch of choruses in it, but it's also got those sort of downbeat bits which really accentuate the choruses, I suppose. Also notable is the inclusion of, I felt in the last album they'd started to add a bit more guitar effects and things like that, which gave the album instrumentally a bit more variation compared to some of the previous more straight up pop punk, although very good, more straight up pop punk stuff, which was good. This is kind of an even further advancement. We've got the inclusion of some electronic sounds, some electronic percussion sounds. We've also got on the final track, excellently named The Ocean Grew Hands to Hold Me, there's this brilliant sort of droning sound reminiscent of Big Ships by Brian Eno, which really almost carries the track really, and that's the sort of sound that we probably wouldn't have expected to appear on a Wonder Years song a few years ago. So a clear progression there with the instrumentation of the album as well, which is really good to see. My only complaint really with the album is the mixing, the production, I suppose. It's although it all kind of sits together fairly well, there's definitely elements, particularly when it gets really loud, and the climax of the final track, The Ocean Grew Hands to Hold Me, would be a prime example where I just feel like there's a bit too much cymbal going on. They've turned the treble up a bit too much, and it's, with certain headphones, it just really kind of very grating on the ears because the guy's doing a lot of cymbal work, which is fine because he's trying to build this big climax, the drummer. But if you've got the treble turned up too high, all you're getting is a lot of cymbal, and it's quite grating on the ears. I don't know if that's just me. I do sound engineering myself, so maybe it bothers me more than other people, but that I found a little bit disappointing, and I had to kind of change the headphones I was using for a pair that's a bit more sort of bass exaggerated to make that a bit less annoying, which was a shame, but not a deal breaker by any means, but definitely did take away from my enjoyment of the album a little bit, which was a shame. Finally, the album closes with a song called The Ocean Grew Hands to Hold Me, which I think is one of the strongest songs that the Wonder Years have written. It's not necessarily a very Wonder Years song, it's one of those songs where you've kind of got the, the chorus essentially is made by, is it instrumental as opposed to, sung out or catchy or anything like that. It's an instrumental chorus, a bit like, for example, a song like Song for Zula by Phosphorescent, where you've got the verse, instrumental section, verse, instrumental section, and it's the instrumental section which kind of adds a lot of the emotion to the track, and that's definitely what this song is like. And it just kind of, the chorus, the instrumental bit, builds up as the song goes on and really finishes on a massive climax. It's a really, really good song. It's certainly one of my favourites, like I say, on the album and in the entire Wonder Years back catalogue. It's one that when I saw them live, it made me cry. It was just beautiful. I was just stood in the middle of the floor, I kind of closed my eyes and I just sunk it all in, and it was a really, really, really moving experience. And I kind of wish that they hadn't come out for an encore after that, because it just felt like I suppose it felt like a perfect finish to the gig, which was a really, really good gig. But I wish that had been the last thing that happened, and that they'd played that song and then just gone home, done with it. So yeah, I'm a big fan of this album. I think it's really built on what they've done last. It's not breaking any massive ground or anything. It's not doing anything that I haven't heard anything like before, but they do what they do incredibly well. I've always been a fan of Soupy's vocals. I think he's a very, very passionate vocalist. He's able to go to those falsettos, he's able to scream, he's able to sing in a more sort of melodic way as well. He can do it all really, and he's also just got this way of really embodying what he's singing. I think he makes you feel what he's feeling, and it feels like, I suppose this is an overused term in music, but it feels authentic, if you know what I mean. Feels like he's feeling what he's singing about, which is something that is really important with bands. I just think it's a really good album, lots of good tracks. It blends together really well, while not sort of being, they don't necessarily blend into each other, but they do sit well together as an album. I'd have personally cut maybe one or two, made the album a little bit shorter. Orange Grove, for example, not my favourite track. I could have done without that one, although I have heard people who really like that track, so I guess, whatever. If you'd cut that out, then some other people would have missed out on one of their favourite songs, which would have been a shame. But for me, I'd have cut that one out. I don't think it does anything massively interesting. Even the single Sister Cities, while being a good song, I think is one of the less interesting tracks on the album. It's a bit more old school Wonder Years, been there, done that kind of thing. It's a good song, like I say, but it doesn't really add or develop their catalogue, in my opinion. So even if something like that was missing, I wouldn't have been too upset. But overall, I think this is a really, really great album. I don't know what to give it out of 10. I think it's probably between an 8 and an 8.5 out of 10. A really, really good album. I'd recommend everyone checks it out. If you've never heard of the Wonder Years, this is probably a good place to start. If you're into more pop punk than the emo kind of side of things, maybe go for something like The Greatest Generation to start with. That's a bit more pop punky, but they're an excellent band. You can't really go wrong with any of their albums, to be honest. But my favourites are certainly the last two, No Closer to Heaven and this one, and I'd say this is a pretty good place to start. So yeah, we've got a Stick Around is actually a podcast primarily at the minute. This is the first YouTube video. Hopefully I'll keep doing some more, but check out, if you just go on stickaroundpodcast.com, I'll link it all down there in the notes. You can see we've got articles about stuff. At the minute I'm doing a thing about Studio Ghibli. We've got all the latest episodes. If you just go to your podcast app, search for Stick Around, you can find us in there. And just press the old subscribe button. Don't know where it is, I'm new to this. Do you agree? Do you disagree? Do you think this is a 10 out of 10 album? Do you think, what are you talking about, Clive? It's a 2.5. Comments below, but remember, be kind to each other.